Hey guys, quick programming note. We dropped a special bonus episode last Thursday on The Writing Life by Annie Dillard. It is a book about inspiration, the process, and so much more. I really enjoyed making it. If you missed it, it's there in your feed. This week, I'll be sending out some extra notes and materials on that book we've been digging into. So if you haven't already, make sure you're signed up for the 10-Year Town community, which you can join at 10yeartown.com. What's up, everybody? It's Troy Cartwright. Welcome back to another episode of 10-Year Town. Before we get started, I wanted to give you today's stat of the week, powered by Chartmetric. Today's number is 385,413. That is the total number of radio airplay spins on songs written by this week's guest, and that is just from the top 5 songs in his catalog. One of the things I love about Chartmetric is how you can see the full scope of a songwriter's career and break it down in so many different ways, whether it's spins, streams, playlists, and more. If you want to uncover insights like this for yourself, head to chartmetric.com. Now, back to the show. Today's guest is the legendary Monty Criswell. You know Monty from songs like Hell of a View, recorded by Eric Church, I Saw God Today, recorded by George Strait, and Handle on You, recorded by Parker McCollum. He also wrote one of my favorite Eric Church songs of all time, a song called Russian Roulette. Monty is a career songwriter here in Nashville. He's got stories for days. He's got advice for days. And I really enjoyed this conversation. I know you guys are going to love it too. So without further ado, here he is, Monty Criswell. Thanks for being here, man.
Well, thank you for having me.
It's about time. For all of those listening, this is the one of the co-writers on the instrumental theme song that plays every episode, which is also a fantastic song in its own right. One of my favorites.
Well, I love the song.
Yeah, it's been good for me. How you doing, man?
I'm doing great. Just chipping away at it, and we're still finding a way to have success. I've been here 32 years.
Yeah. It's funny. Like one time we wrote, it was 2 or 3 years ago, and you were like, I feel like I'm on like one of the last chairs in the Titanic. And that really stuck with me. And I thought, dang, I got in at the wrong time.
Well, I think sometimes, some days you feel like you're rearranging deck furniture on the Titanic. Yeah. And then some days you go around and go, man, I got a speedboat. This is great.
Yeah.
And I think every day is different. And I think sometimes, as a writer, you get up and you have expectations that today's going to be a great day. And we got great ideas. We know what we're shooting for. And it ends up being something that is the total opposite of that. Right. And then sometimes you come in and you're like, I'm jet lagged. I've been traveling. I have nothing. Mm-hmm. And somebody says something in the room. And
that's when the magic happens.
And then boom, it just happens.
Yeah, that's why you still kind of gotta show up every chance you get, right? Because you never know.
You do. You show up whether you feel like it or not. And and I think sometimes if you think about it too much, that's problematic. You start going, how exactly is this happening? How does it supposed to happen? And then you walk away at the end of the day and you're like, I don't know what happened. Yeah. I might have blacked out, you know, but it just happens. And I think part of that is muscle memory and just relaxing enough to be creative. Yeah.
I listened to this thing and it said, it was some podcast I was listening to. I can't remember who it was, but they said like the muse likes to find you working.
Yes.
And it sounded true at the time. I was like, that seems like a thing that's true. But I've noticed that recently I've been feeling like a little out of ideas. Mm-hmm. But I got like a million little things I'm working on, mm-hmm. and I find that when I'm just doing the work, a new idea sort of comes in and lands,
just shows up
on my desk, and I'm like, oh, okay, catch that, tuck it away for later, and then all of a sudden you've got 10 new ideas that you're excited to write, and
I think sometimes it's just a matter of just relaxing your brain a little bit. Like if you'll go do something else, whether it's return an email or address some paperwork or something that's more business than music. I think it kind of opens up that other side of your brain a little bit. And I think, the old quote, the harder you work, the luckier you get.
That's true.
I think that's very true, you know, and it's like, I have a penchant for getting up kind of early. The older I get, I want to go to bed earlier and get up early. And, but I those moments in the morning sometimes when you're still working on the first cup of coffee is a good time to kind of let your brain kind of go. And I go exercise every morning and that helps me. It's the blood flowing and my mind wanders around. And then at night I kind of look over everything one more time and see kind of what do I have this week, and I think those little things like that, just to kind of keep your brain moving, it's very beneficial to me. And I read a lot. That's my other secret. What
do you like to read?
Well, you know what? It's funny. It's I'm in a whole yacht rock phase right now. I'm reading. I did finish Kenny Loggins, working on Michael McDonald, all that kind of stuff, because it's almost summertime, and we just I love all that. I love all the melody. I miss that
love
sometimes.
yacht. I had a yacht rock band at my wedding.
Did you? Really?
I mean, at Berkeley, yacht rock, it was the thing. Because it's
very musical.
It's so musical. It's kind of funny reading the lyrics to some of that stuff. It doesn't always quite,
Right.
It's not like necessarily like the most beautiful poem you've ever seen, but I think it's a good lesson on if it feels good.
A great melody covers up a multitude of sins.
No doubt, dude. No doubt.
No, I do that, and this is really weird, but I read a lot of poetry, like really contemporary avant-garde stuff that really doesn't rhyme. It's just it's more stream of consciousness and short blocks. And I've kind of gotten out of this a little bit lately, but I read a lot of short story stuff. They used to have a book that I'm sure you can get it online now. You can just find it and read them. But it was like best contemporary short stories of 2024 or whatever.
Oh, okay.
And I like those because I didn't have a lot of time invested in something. If I didn't like the story, it wasn't like reading a novel. Because I feel compelled if to start to finish.
Don't I know? Yeah.
And so I have books that are just airplane books. If when I travel and do shows on the road or go ride on the road or whatever. I'll just read those books on the airplane. So I have my airplane stack and I have my other stack,
I've got it all. I read a lot as well. I've got it all regimented out. I've got my history book. I try and read that one in the morning, and then I've also got a nighttime book, just fiction, sort of
That's good.
Easy to read I just read that in bed, on the Kindle.
See, there's a pattern here.
Yeah. I mean, all my good ideas come from books, books and movies and stuff too. But I'm just obsessed with, I think, I can't, writing a book seems so hard. I can't imagine. That seems way harder than writing a song to me.
Well, because you're out of that 3.5 minute zone, You're into hours and hours. I read a Hemingway biography back several years ago, and it was by, I think it's Mary Dearborn. I think she's the only female to bio Hemingway.
Cool.
And it was 700 something pages. It was more of a tome than it was a book. And it was an airplane book for me.
Okay.
And the irony, I was traveling a lot at the time, and I still do with Derek George, our buddy. And he was reading a Hemingway book. His was smaller, and he was like, that thing is huge. I was like, it feels like I'm toting around an Encyclopedia Britannica, And I'm thinking, I'm not going to get a song idea out of this.
Yep.
I just want to know more about Hemingway and the process and everything that he went through. And then somebody, she made the comment in the book of something to the effect of somebody had asked him, is writing easy? And he said, yeah. He said, you just sitting at the typewriter and bleed. And I thought that was great. So I wrote a song called Bleed on Paper with Casey Beathard and Tucker Beathard, and Eric Church recorded it. So it should be on this new album coming out.
Oh,
so
that's awesome.
So we found one idea in 700 pages.
Hey,
but it was worth it. It was worth it.
Yeah, that's amazing. I can't wait to hear that. That's such an awesome title. Let's take a quick break here to tell you about our friends, the Graphic Guitar Guys. If you've ever thought about having a custom guitar, whether for merch, a giveaway, or a unique VIP package item, Graphic Guitar Guys makes it simple. They've worked with some of the biggest names in country music, handling everything from the guitar to full color graphics and shipping, and it's all for one easy price. They're also a great option for album pre-sale bundles or fan collectibles. I've worked with Scott and the rest of the team myself, and they really do make the whole process effortless. Check them out at thegraphicguitarguys.com. Now, back to the show. Well, let's go back a little bit. You said so earlier, but I do always like to ask people, how long have you been in town, and where'd you come from?
I've been doing it 32 years, and I moved here officially in 95. My first writing deal was in 93.
Okay.
And you will love this. It was a 10-year town for me.
Yep.
I started coming up here in 1985.
Okay.
I was in high school. Graduated in 86. I grew up in a little town called Satsuma, Alabama, just north of Mobile.
Okay.
Right in the middle of Mobile, Tensas River Delta. So I tell everybody, if you like snakes, alligators, mosquitoes, heat and humidity, it was paradise. And Mobile's, just below that on the coast and everything. And so it took me about 10 years of coming back and forth, getting knocked in the head, not giving up.
Yeah.
I went to University of Alabama, graduated there. I was going to go to law school, be an entertainment lawyer.
Okay.
If I could not get a writing deal. And I finally got a writing deal and got into law school at the same time. And
what'd you do?
Became a songwriter.
There you go.
And it was a hard decision for me. I mean, I was really kind of paralysis by analysis, locked in the fork of the road. And
it's not probably a financially necessarily smart decision.
Right. It was very, very daunting and very tough. And I had kind of been groomed academically to I did well in school. So I was kind of like, I didn't like making B's. I'd rather make the A.
Yeah.
But I love the experience of learning. Alabama. There's things I learned at Alabama I still use.
Yeah.
I read some Kurt Vonnegut when I was at Alabama, and I joke I haven't been forced to read that since I left. And I found a song idea in there in a quote about him that ended up being Hell of a View on Eric Church. You know? And so there was just little things.
What Vonnegut book is that from?
I don't remember. It was actually a quote by him.
Okay.
And the quote was something to the effect of, I try to live my life as close to the edge as I can get without falling off, because there's things you can see out there you can't see in the middle. And I told that to Casey Beathard, and Casey's like a poet laureate with a hard hat, the blue collar poet.
No doubt.
And he goes, well, it's a hell of a view, and that's kind of was the seed for that song.
Yeah.
So, but came up here and I worked for Millsap Galbraith for a couple of years, just kind of single song kind of stuff, Ronnie Millsap's company. And then Jeff Carlton signed me at Hamstein.
Okay.
And I was there with Tony Martin and Tom Shapiro and Chuck Jones, Lee Thomas Miller, Jim Rushing.
The legends, man.
So there was just a lot of great people, and Lee and I were very young at the time, and we were chasing Tony, and Tony was chasing Tom.
Yeah.
And so we were all paced pretty good, And Jeff was just, Jeff passed away a few years ago, but just a great publisher. I have a great dad and a great father-in-law, and Jeff was kind of he was my Nashville dad.
Yeah. Well, how did it, I think people are always curious, like how you get started, like what was sort of did you know somebody when you started coming to Nashville? Did you just sort of like show up on Music Row and knock on somebody's door? Or
I had a friend of a friend. I started playing piano when I was 6, which means I should be way better than I am, but I'm not. I'm kind of people go, well, Monty's a piano playing lyricist, with a heavy left gospel hand. And I'm a hat guitar player.
Yeah.
Kind of learned that after the fact. And I was writing songs starting at probably about 12 years old, playing garage bands. Wow. And we had some friends of ours that live right around the corner. Their names are Melvin and Shirley Robinson. And they said, we have a real good friend of ours who's a songwriter in Nashville. And I said, okay. And he said, his name is Roger Murrah. And I said, okay. And Roger wasn't just a working songwriter. He was like BMI Songwriter of the Year and all that kind of stuff. So he was writing for, I think, Tom Collins at the time. And so the next time he was in town, they called me, and Roger wanted to meet with me and everything. And he was just encouraging, and he said, well, next time you're in Nashville, get your folks to bring you up. Because, I wasn't driving at the time,
Yeah.
And he said, I'll kind of show you around. There's a community of writers here in this town. Mm-hmm. And I was like, you mean there's people here in this town? He said they get paid to do what they, I was like, oh my gosh, this is hillbilly Nirvana, this is great.
Yeah.
So I came up, and he brought me into the publishing office. Keith Stigall was writing over there at the time. And he introduced me to Bob McDill at lunch. He was one of my heroes. I came here, I wanted to be Bob McDill and Mac McAnally.
Yeah.
And so it was just amazing to me that there was this community. And that was one of those things that kind of captured my imagination in a way that songwriting had as well, And it was still magic to me to create something that didn't exist that morning.
When you say it capture your imagination, do you just mean like that there were other people like you that were obsessed with writing songs?
Yeah, I think if you come from a small town, I don't know, it feels like maybe now it's more prevalent, but there was in Mobile as a greater area as opposed to just Satsuma, there was 3 or 4 people I knew that were writers. Beth Nelson Chapman came out of Mobile, great songwriter, great singer too. There was a couple other people. This one guy, his name escapes me right now. But he had some success on I think Lasso of the Moon and Every Which Way But Loose, and I cannot believe I can see his face and can't think of his name.
Yeah.
But there was 3 or 4 of us that had kind of been brave enough to venture up here, But the fact that there was a whole community of people from all of these small towns all over the country that were here in one location, trying to get their hands on this real hazy, nebulous concept of being a professional songwriter was just amazing to me.
Yeah.
And that kind of began the whole left brain, right brain thing of me wanting to be a writer, but going, hey, if I can't, I'll just be an entertainment lawyer. I could, by proxy, I'll be close.
Yeah, you'll be, but you, either way, you had this desire to be close to this.
100%.
Yeah, it's so interesting. I was so, it was so late when I even realized that there was that you could live in Nashville and write songs.
You're a Texas guy, right?
Yeah.
No.
But I even went to music college.
Right.
And then I went back to Texas and still I didn't understand. Somehow the information was never received on my end. That like there was a whole, community in Nashville. And I had a very similar experience. I was like 26 by the time I realized it. But when I did, and I came here and got set up on, my co-writes, and somebody took me out to like Red Door and was like, all these people are songwriters. It was like, what?
Yeah. They used to have the little magazine, and it was like, I don't know, Country Song Roundup or something like that. It was like a flimsy, like a comic book.
Yeah.
And you could open it up and had lyrics and had all the country hits in it. And I read the lyrics and studied those, try to kind of make sense of some semblance of craft or arrangement or something. But I wanted to see who wrote it. I was like hunting, I was songwriter stalking, And then I would open up Billboard magazine and find, what are the publishers associated with the writers that I love?
Yeah.
And then I'll come up here and I did the whole thing of, it's how old I am, sending cassettes and all that kind of stuff. And I put a piece of red tape around mine. So if I call the receptionist and she's like, oh yeah, I've got it. I said, it's got a piece of red tape. She goes, oh yeah, I've got it. She'd pull it out and stick it back on top.
That's branding.
Branding.
Look at you.
Branding. Didn't even know I was branding.
Yeah.
So, but yeah, and that community is still here in spirit. We've lost a lot of those small little publishing houses. There's still a lot, but we kind of turned into Condo Row, Music Row a little bit.
Yeah. Yeah. I asked Tom Douglas when he was on here, like if he was worried about it, the future, and I think he said like something along the lines of, well, like it's always seemed like it's about to all fall apart. It never has, you know, so I take a lot of comfort in that. But yeah, it's even since I've been here, moved here in 2016, it's changed a lot. It's hard. It's hard to sort of square things with the way that publishing pays out and et cetera, but there's still great music being made. And,
it is.
I think the heart of the songwriter is still the music industry can't exist without it. So I do have faith that we'll keep figuring it out somehow.
Yeah, it's a very fluid dynamic at all times. And I was hanging out with, I won't name him just in case he doesn't want to be named, but one of the publishing heads of one of the multinationals here. Yeah. And he said, I do think that the music business will change more in the next 4 years than it has in the last 10.
Wow.
And I think that's probably true. And I think taking taking Don Henley out of context, but when he said the lawyer sort out all details in the age of the innocence, in the end of the innocence, that's probably who's going to sort this stuff out as we go.
Yeah.
But the creative aspect, that seed, that spark, is still here. And if you doubt it, go to the Bluebird and watch. Or go to the listening room or wherever. Yeah. And some of these buildings around us, where we are right now, when we first got here, I know certainly when I didn't exist, or they look drastically different.
Yeah.
But it's kind of like a church. You can build a brand new church, but it's the people that make the church up.
That's right.
So
that's right. Well, after you moved here, what was kind of like your first, big success that you had?
Well, mine was kind of elongated.
Okay.
I signed with Hamstein in 95.
Mm-hmm.
So there's my 10 years, 85 to 95.
Yep.
And I had gotten had songs on like little independent stuff that, some people at the time wouldn't count those as major cuts. Now it's like everything that gets cut is basically a major cut because you have the chance of it blowing up virally,
Right.
So I got a cut on Mark Wills on his first album, and that was about 5 months after I signed. And I kind of felt like the monkey was off my back a little bit. I was like, okay, I'm in the group, it was on Mercury Records, and I was so proud of it. I remember like rubbing my name in the parentheses just to make sure. Like Jeff's like, "What are you doing?" I was like, "I'm just making sure it's not coming off because it took so long to get it on there, And he goes, "It's not coming off." He said, "But put that up because we have to go get the next one." And that's the reality of being a professional songwriter. And a few months went by, and I got a cut on John Michael Montgomery, and when he was just on fire, so that was like gold and platinum real quick. So then all of a sudden, I had something to hang on the wall that was a reminder, you can do this.
Yeah.
And then I kind of went into being king of the album cuts for a long time. I had a number one gospel song in that time period, and I probably had 30-something songs cut while I was at Hamstein. That was back when, if you got a cut, it was a gold record, Yeah,
and a cut, and because of the way mechanicals worked,
that's right.
You were generating revenue.
I was generating revenue, and that's the one thing I miss nowadays versus the old days is that it gave people like me, a young writer who still had a lot to figure out, time to figure it out, and time to learn how to be not just a songwriter, but a hit songwriter. Not just what to put in a song, but what not to put in it at the same time.
Yeah.
And we don't have that now. So we're losing generations of writers, I think, because we're so dependent on having radio hits to generate income, that we're losing a lot of that next generation of songwriters that could be the next Tom Douglas or the next Bob McDill or whatever. And so that happened for me and went on for a while. And Tom Shapiro left Hamstein, started his own company. It was a joint venture, JV with Sony ATV Tree. And he kind of recruited me, and I went over and wrote for Tom, and I had my first hit kind of on Mark Wills, ironically enough.
Yeah.
Song called Lovin' Every Minute. Got my first BMI awards, and man, I remember everything about that night. I was so happy to be there. When I walked out the door, Toby Keith stopped me, and he goes, "Hey man, congrats." And I said, "Thanks." I had never met him before.
Yeah.
And he said, "Is that your first one?" I said, "Yes, sir." And he said, "Well, here's hoping it won't be the last." And I said, "I appreciate that." And he goes, "What song?" And I told him, and my wife was standing there, and I said, "Well, my wife's a fan. Can I get a picture?" And he goes, "Absolutely." And just as nice as he could be, and he kind of made me feel like I was in the group, and never had a chance since then to talk to him, but I remember that moment where he treated me like an equal, even though I was not.
Yeah.
And that went on for a little while, and we had a bunch more cuts, and I was on albums that were sold 1 million, 2 million copies, And I'm thinking, man, if I could just have a hit, a hit, like a big one.
Yeah.
And I went to Big Tractor and wrote for Scott Hendricks, and Jason Krupak was our GM there. And not too long after being there, I wrote a song called Tough that Craig Morgan recorded, and that was my first top 10.
Wow.
So then I kind of felt like, okay, I'm getting there. And about a year or so after that, I wrote a song called I Saw God Today with Rodney Clawson and Wade Kirby, and that went on just to be a massive hit on George Strait. And that kind of changed things. And it was funny because in a town full of perceptions, people listened to my songs differently.
Yeah.
Because of that song.
Yeah.
But because I had all that time to learn,
you were ready.
I felt like I was ready, and that was kind of the one that broke the dam. At that point, we started having hits. We started just being very visible, and there were times I remember driving home going, "Man, I think I got a handle on this thing."
What? So how long was it? When did I Saw God Today happen?
That was 2008.
Yeah.
So a long time. I remember like I was in my 30s when Tough hit, and I was 39 when I Saw God Today hit. Wow. And I'll be 57 next month. Dang. But it was just, I look back, you know, when I left home, I moved up here with my wife. She was a very trusting soul, and she just retired. She was a geneticist in oncology, which means she diagnosed cancer for a living, and I rhyme stuff for a living. But we came up here and slugged it out together. You know, we didn't have a pot to piss in or the proverbial window to throw it out of.
Yeah.
And but we did it together. Yeah. And that's really what matters. But I remember my mom told me, she said, "Time tests all dreams," mm-hmm. and I always remember that just about every other day, because it's still doing that. You know, we're still all working. You and I both are working to try to find a way as professional songwriters with publishing deals to find a way to get it done. Yeah.
Yeah. What do you, you know, what do you find helps you when you're in, I feel that every so often I enter what I'll just call like a pit of despair.
The old pit of despair.
Yeah, and sometimes I feel like I built my house there.
Yes. Well,
so what do you do?
Usually, sometimes I go into the pit and then out of the pit multiple times during the day. You know, I do remember driving home at sometimes and just going, "Oh my gosh, we have a family. We're going to starve to death." You know. I think the thing that helps me, and this is what I've been doing lately, because I've had this a little bit, because I'm in kind of a transition part of what I'm doing professionally, and I'll tell you about that in a minute. But to remember the reason I started helps me.
Which was what?
That it was the magic of creating something that didn't exist.
Yeah.
That I'm proud of at the end of the day. And sometimes you have to create some things that you're not necessarily proud of from the standpoint of, you know, that's the greatest thing. I feel like I wrote something great. Sometimes you're kind of, sometimes it's like digging a ditch, you know, and sometimes it's a magical process. But if I get into the blood sport of it, which is very easy to do in a cutthroat place, whether it's Nashville, LA, Atlanta, Miami, New York, whatever, I think it starts detracting from who you are as a true craftsman.
Yeah.
And if I go back to finding a line or finding an idea that I go, "Oh man, I love that. That's great." And I can feel those verses coming and the chorus and the melody and all that kind of stuff. That's a real honest space for me. And it seems to behoove me a lot from a creative standpoint as a writer to remember why I started and not get so caught up in the blood sport of just winning, just winning. So that's kind of what I do. And it's a struggle. It's not an easy thing to do. Yeah. I think you have to work, you have to force yourself to do it.
Yeah. To get there and stay there. But I have not had anywhere near the success that you've had, but I do find that the answer for me is always in like just the next song, right? Doing the work, and that's the only part I can control.
I think that's another thing that helps too. Is like sitting around thinking about it too much.
Yeah.
It makes you regress and go the other way.
Yeah. Sometimes you just got to do it.
You just got to do it. Yeah. It's, and I don't think it's as much as procrastination. I guess maybe that's a little bit of it, but it's almost like, just doing the motion creates, just like you said, doing something else, even if it's not writing, a lot of times we'll end up in a song idea somewhere.
Oh, yeah.
So, and just paying attention to what's going on around you.
Yeah, I mean, you can find a song putting together a bedside table.
Oh, you absolutely can.
I mean, a lot of times there's some good songs in there.
That's right.
Just in that, I don't know. Like sometimes I think about taking up gardening just because I'm like, I bet my mind will wander and doing this.
That's so on point, because it's like I love cutting the grass.
Yeah.
And I do it with a push mower because it takes longer to do, and it's like I'm very meticulous about it. My wife's like, you could get somebody else to cut the grass. Like, yeah, but I don't know if they could edge the driveway just exactly.
That's
like
right.
When I walk out for 2 or 3 days before it starts growing back, I want to see it like that.
Yeah.
And my former next door neighbor, he's moved now, but he said, you probably could afford to hire somebody to cut the grass. I said, I know. He said, but you don't. I watch you out here just sweat in the sun. I said, yeah. He said, why? And I said, because it's one of the few things I have left. Maybe the only thing that I see an immediate return.
Yeah.
It didn't look that great 2 or 3 hours ago, and now it looks really well, and I can sit here by the fire pit and enjoy the fact that I have a visible result pretty quick, as opposed to we wrote a song 5 years ago and it got cut. That's the antithesis of that. So I need those little things.
I get it. That makes a ton of sense. Kind of makes me want to start mowing the grass.
See, but like wood carving would be out. It's like that's you and I could lose a finger, and that's probably not good.
I need these.
I need these.
Yeah. Well, you talked about Hell of a View a little bit already. Can you tell me about you wrote a big Parker McCollum hit a few years ago?
Yep.
And I'm a big Parker fan. We kind of came up together in Texas.
Great Texas guy.
Yeah. But yeah, tell me about it.
So my oldest daughter, Olivia, who'll be 26 July 4th, she did her undergrad at University of Kentucky. So my wife and I, we went back and forth to Lexington a whole lot. So we drove that whole Bluegrass Parkway, which is basically the Whiskey Trail.
Yeah.
And so we went on a couple of adventures here and there. We went to Woodford and saw it, which was really incredible. And so it's funny because that was kind of on my brain, just all those different kinds of whiskeys and all the. I was just wordplay with Heaven Hill or Four Roses or whatever, when I'd see some of the stuff. And then I got to thinking about, and this is not a Kentucky bourbon because Tennessee whiskey is trademarked differently, but Jack Daniels, and I was just wordplaying, like songwriters do, driving down the road or whatever. And I got to messing around, just rhyming Daniels, handle of Daniels, and I was like, oh, handle on you, got a handle on you.
Yeah.
And I love the idea. And that was the second song that Parker and I had ever written. And we wrote it, I think it was July 1st. I know it was 2020 because we were like, are we still on? Because we're in the height of the pandemic. It looked like a ghost town down here, And he had a place over at the Morris, which is a kind of a condo thing off of 18th, 19th, thereabouts. And so Warner Chappell, where he writes, had hit our publisher at Spirit back and said, hey, Parker's good if Monty's good. And he can just come down to his place if he wants. So I texted him. I said, hey, we're good. I'll be there. He goes, yep. He said, they'll give you a little pushback at the front desk, but I'll come down there and get you.
Yeah.
Put a mask on so you can get past the front desk. I said, okay. So sure enough, he met me in the lobby. He's like, he's good. He's with me. He's like, all right. So we go up there. And Parker's not one to really write from a title or an idea. I didn't know that at the time, which is probably a good thing that I didn't know it.
Yeah.
He's more of he's a true artist in the sense that he's looking for something melodic to inspire him, but he's looking for something that just kind of comes out of that melody. And so patience is very important to kind of, like I try, if I'm writing with somebody that I really, like we have some artists that are kind of, they're great singers in their acts, but some artists that are more go down a rabbit hole of creativity, and all of those are great and all of those work, and I love all of those kinds of artists. But Parker, I try not to 615 him too much, kind of let him be what he grew up being in Texas, and because that's kind of who he is.
Yeah.
And I said, man, I've got this one thing. I said, it's kind of it's a hooky kind of bumper sticker title. He goes, okay. And I said, it's called Handle on You. I finally got a handle on you. I went and bought the biggest bottle they got, Yeah. And he goes, I like that. And he starts playing the melody. And so we start spitting lyric, and it's just kind of popping. It's one of those things I tell people, they're like, how long should it take to write a hit song? And I'm like, I don't know. If your child is 13 hours of labor versus an hour and a half, it doesn't mean that the one that's 13 hours is going to be smarter than the one that took an hour and a half.
Yeah.
And it was just kind of happening, and we got to the chorus, and we're literally just one line, back and forth, just ping-ponging back and forth. And we get to that setup line, and he says, after all the back and forth, the fifth won't do. And I was just like, oh my gosh, I think this might be great,
Yeah.
And it just fit. And we kind of, we set up that Haggard reference in the first verse, and we kind of came back to think I'll just stay here and drink in the second verse to kind of call back to that a little bit. So there's some Easter eggs that happen naturally. And I remember we walked away and it's like, okay, that's a good day's work. 2 or 3 hours, and we were done. And I texted him the next day. I said, man, that back and forth fifth won't do line may be better today than I thought it was yesterday, because I just had some time to digest it a little bit.
Yeah.
And it was just kind of a happy accident that happened, a magical kind of thing. And he was in the process, I think, of finishing that first album that had Pretty Heart on it. And so it was kind of like we were late to the show for that.
Yeah.
And a few months went by, and that album came out, and he said, "Hey, how do you feel about demoing this thing?" And I said, "I'd be happy to, And it was kind of a George Strait-ish kind of vibes. I put a fiddle and steel on it, I overdubbed it.
Yeah.
And Julian King engineered it and tracked it, and he came in and sang it. And it sounded great, And then a longer period of time, several months went by, like maybe of a year. And he texted me like early one Saturday morning. And he said, "Hey, Mr. Criswell, this is Parker McCollum. You may or may not remember me," which was a whole joke, It was just funny. And so he said, "Man, I want to talk to you about this song." And so I called him. He started laughing as soon as he picked up. And I was like, "Of course I remember you, And he said, "Man, I think this thing's great." Yeah. And I said, "Okay." And he said, "I played it for some folks." And he said, "I think we'll cut this thing." And he said, "I think it's the first single off the record." And we were 2 years past at this point,
Yeah.
And I said, "Well, that would be great." And so we talked for a little while and hung up. And about 3 weeks later, he sends me like a video and a text, and they're at the studio and it's playing. And I said, "Did you cut it?" And he goes, "Well, I told you I would."
Wow.
And sure enough, it was the first single, and then goes on to be just a massive song.
Yeah. Yeah.
So couldn't be more thankful. And, you know this, and not everybody listening does, but I'm a colon cancer survivor.
Yeah.
And so I went through that journey in 2023, and I was fortunate. They caught mine before it spread.
Yeah.
It was stage 3 when they found it. So I got to endure the chemo monster and all that kind of stuff, and the surgery, and they took a foot of colon and 34 lymph nodes, and I responded great to the chemo.
Yeah.
And everything turned out great. And I'm 2 years into getting to year 3. By the time you get to year 3, they say that's like a 0.05% chance it comes back at that point. So
gotcha.
My chances of it coming back will always be a little elevated compared to somebody else.
Yeah.
So, but they watch me like a hawk, and I have a scan next week. We talked about that coming up the elevator. I say all that to say this: that song went number 1 the week I started chemo.
Wow.
So here I am, experiencing the two extremes of life. I had a port put in the day we knew it was number 1, so I still have the divot in my chest. And then 2 days later, we started that. And so as a songwriter, it was the highest of highs, and as a human being, it was the lowest of lows, just trying to find a way to survive. And he checked on me the whole way. He wouldn't take his hand off of me.
Wow.
So it was an amazing experience. So that song is always kind of a watermark for me.
Yeah.
In life that, I tell people, when you get that kind of diagnosis, it doesn't matter how many hit songs you've had, and it doesn't matter what kind of car you drive or where you live. Yeah. It only matters how great your family is and how great your friends are around you. And for me, it was kind of an edifying process.
Yeah.
It wasn't like some people do 180 and they turn and I got to go live my life this way. I was proud of what we had, and I was proud of the songs I've written and proud of the friends I had. And, you and I got hooked up kind of in the vicinity of that, but you got to see me go through some of the recovery and all that kind of stuff.
Yeah.
But that song will always be special.
Yeah. Wow.
For me.
That's crazy. I didn't realize how kind of close those.
It was just right on top of it.
Yeah. So much, there's so much perspective in that.
It is. It really is.
And, I think, it's like, there's these clarifying moments in life.
Right.
But I think the way that you put it is exactly right. It's like, there's nothing,
right.
There's nothing more important than,
right.
than your health, and God gives us all a certain amount of time.
That's right.
Kind of got to do
what
we can with it.
It does. It reminds you to make the most of it. And it reminds me as a songwriter to write some songs that are just fun.
Yeah.
Not take myself too seriously, but it also makes me want to look a little harder and be a little choosier sometimes in the writing room if I think the title's great.
Yeah.
Because when we're gone, that's what they'll, I saw somebody said this one time: if you fall in love with a songwriter, you live forever.
Yeah.
And because we're going to write about you. So I tell my wife all the time, I was like, you'll live forever on the FM dial.
Man.
And so, or good. Satellite or streaming or whatever it is, whatever it is. Be.
Yeah. I've just been dabbling. I read a lot of different stuff, and I've been reading a lot of philosophy, all different kinds. But, there's this thing with Nietzsche where he talks about, like, it's sort of, I don't know. I've like run it through my brain so many times that I've like probably completely changed its
Right.
what it actually means.
Times.
But I think of it as like the Groundhog Day paradox.
Right.
Which is like, if your average day that you live, if you got stuck on it, would you have a happy life?
Wow.
And I think that's one of the things in my own life that I feel like is a huge blessing, is like most days, if I got stuck living it over and over again, I would be very satisfied.
Yes.
Because I love to write songs.
Yeah.
You know?
Same. And I think maybe the solution to that is to work really hard every day to have an above average day.
Yeah.
So if you get stuck with that.
Yeah. It's motivating.
Then it's good. And it is motivating. It is. It kind of, like you said, it redirects you know, your perspective. I had talked to Parker, I guess, about a week ago, and he was just kind of checking in on me, you know, and we were planning on, I'm going to go out with him in July and do some writing. And because he goes, how is it getting on a bus now after all the surgery? And I said, well, I've done it twice.
Yeah.
I did it twice last year, because you do have to kind of pick and choose your times of when you're going to eat, because your plumbing is different now.
Shorter?
Yes.
Yeah.
There's no green room. So much so, you know, the band shows up and just goes straight to the stage. And he was laughing. I said, but I know how to do it. I said, no pun intended, I have a handle on it. And I said, I just kind of have to gauge when I'm going to eat, and I don't eat on a bus, and I wait for catering and all that kind of stuff. But I've kind of got my drill down, you know. And I've lost my train of thought of exactly where I was going to go with that. So it's contagious.
Yeah, my space cadetness.
Yeah, it'll come back to me in a minute. So
yeah. Well, you were talking about just like going back out on the bus or something like that. But so what's kind of like, what are you up to now? What do you know, like?
Kind of, I'll say the same old, but I say that with quotes around it. It's like the same old for me never sounded so good. You know, to get back into writing. Yeah. And so I'm doing that every day during the week for the most part. I usually save one day, and it's funny, over the years it's moved. Like Wednesday used to be my day. Yeah. Right in the middle, I would return emails and look for song ideas, and I find myself doing that constantly anyway. And usually it's late at night or on the weekends when I kind of mine for song ideas. Mm-hmm. And then Thursday was kind of my day, and now it's Friday. And the reason it's Fridays is because we've kind of taken this experience of a year and a half ago and turned it into kind of a corporate event. I signed management with a company out of Orlando, Florida, called Inkwell Management. They do a lot of public speakings. There's a roster. There's Jake Brown, who's an ex-NFL player. We have several book authors, U.S. champion tennis player. Justin Guarini, who's on American Idol, is on the roster. And I'm kind of a different kind of unicorn that's shown up on the roster. And what we do is we've taken, this is kind of my journey, how I became a songwriter. Mm-hmm. These are several of the hits, stories behind the hits. Yeah. And this is how we overcame adversity at an elite level a year and a half ago, 2 years ago. And if you take all those stories and all the fun part of the ride for 90 minutes out, there's a template. And the template is kind of like, this is how to be better at your job. This is how to be better at this thing called life. This is how to be a better husband or wife or brother or whatever. Yeah. And we've been doing that since really last year. And now we're beginning to pick up speed and do it. And it's great because it works in a corporate setting. Yeah. But it also works in a theater setting where we've been working really diligently behind the scenes to put together some type of, like, tour is too big of a word, but focusing on these 100 to 900 seat theaters that are maybe in a place that, you know, that nobody else is really going. Yeah. And to go in and go, here's this story, you know, and take you on a ride.
It's storytelling.
It's storytelling. It's the same thing, because everywhere you go, you know, when you play write-arounds out, people want to hear the stories. They want to know where the spark came from behind these. The same conversation we're having now. Yeah. That's what they want to know. And so I kind of sneak in this template that's kind of wrapped up. It's kind of like a life coach wrapped in a songwriter round. Yeah. And so we're kind of, most of those happen on sometimes Thursday nights or Thursdays, but it can be Friday or Saturday, and we're kind of either we call it an evening with Monty Criswell, but sometimes it's a morning or sometimes it's a lunch, you know, or whatever. And we find that everywhere we do it, we get immediately, they go, we want you back next year.
Wow.
And I've done it in front of doctors. I've done it in front of cancer infusion nurses. I've done it in front of bankers.
Yeah.
I've done it in front of just general public at theaters and stuff. And the response has been overwhelming, where people go, tell the story because you put a face of humanity on that process, you know. And yes, there's some things that will break your heart in it, and there's some things that will inspire you. And there's some funny things, you know, like cancer is not funny. We've all lost friends to that horrible disease, but a sense of humor sometimes can get you through those moments when you least expect it. And so we find some joy in it and all this kind of stuff. And it's a roller coaster ride for 90 minutes. And so I'm still a songwriter during the week, but on the weekends I get to go do that.
Wow.
So, and it's really been an incredible journey.
How did you kind of, I guess, craft the show? Did they?
It's a good question.
Does somebody? I don't know. I'm imagining someone's like, well, here's a couple heroes' journeys. Can you?
I had to write out a script, and it was very daunting. It was like, because I won't say pressure. I've just kind of been nudged a little bit. But I have two managers, Stevie Johns at Inkwell and Jay Pieper that works with Nashville Nights.
Yeah,
and they're like, you know, you have to write a book at some point, but you can't write the show in a book.
Right.
You have to do it a different way. And my wife has really come up with a great idea of how we're going to do it that I think will kind of set it apart. But I really didn't have any intention of doing it while I was just trying to survive, you know.
Yeah.
We would do these corporate shows for years, and people would come up and go, man, have you ever thought about doing like a life coach thing? You have these great stories. And because I have really unusual stories, maybe not unusual, but they're stories about how a lot of these songs came into being. And of course, I didn't know at the time that it was all going to come to this by divine intervention, this incredible fruition.
Yeah.
And it kept popping up. People kept saying it. And so the whole time we were going through the cancer stuff, Cigna was our insurance at the time. And Kelly was my, not infusion nurse, Kelly was my case nurse. Mm-hmm. And I don't know what Kelly looks like. I couldn't pick her out of a police lineup, you know, but I talked to her every 2 weeks.
Yeah.
And she would call me. How we doing? How's everything? And I was over at Vanderbilt Ingram Cancer Center, which was ironic because I'm walking into the building named after Frances Preston, who ran BMI. And I've been a BMI writer since I was 16. And I'm like, her name is on some of my BMI awards. And here I am in the building.
Wow.
But she helped build this, saving my life, you know.
Yeah.
And so they were elite with the care, had a great medical team. I'm friends with all my doctors now, you know. It's like, stick around because I'm going to need your help on a book because I just learned how to pronounce oxaliplatin chemo, and it took me 2 years.
Yeah.
And so Kelly would check on me every 2 weeks, you know. And Kelly, if you stumble on this, you were a godsend.
Yeah.
And she goes, so what do you do for a living? So I told her, you know, and she's like, that's amazing. And she said, anything I would know? And I said, if you listen to country, she goes, I do, you know. So I wrote off some titles, and she goes, this is astounding. She goes, you know, you have such a great attitude. And I said, well, I was fortunate because they said, here's the deal. This is not cancer light. This stuff will kill you.
Yeah.
So it's whatever you're not special. So just go ahead and embrace that. And I was like, okay. Because at first I was kind of like, well, maybe I have this is cancer light, you know. And they're like, no, this is the bad stuff. But because it hasn't spread and there's no metastasis, your chance of being okay and growing old and ugly with everybody else, which I may have already checked those two boxes, it's pretty high.
Yeah.
It's you have a really good chance of everything working out in your favor, but you have to go through all this chemo and you have to go through the surgery, and it's going to be a nasty process. And there's parts of you physically that are never going to be the same after this. I have neuropathy in my feet from the chemo. My feet are kind of semi-numb right now, and I wake up every day, and that's part of my journey.
Yeah.
But as one of my surgeons told me, I only have one, I won't say his name, even though he might like that. I love him to death. He's just great. He's just he says the right thing to me at the right time in a blunt way that I go, I get that.
Yeah. And
he said, let me tell you about neuropathy and being cut up and having the scars and all this kind of stuff. I said, okay. He goes, you can't bitch about it if you're dead. Mm. And I was like, I'm happy to complain.
Yeah.
Which means I stopped complaining.
Right.
I'm happy to be here. You know, the old adage, growing old is a privilege denied to many, you know?
No doubt.
And so Kelly said, you should put something together.
Yeah.
You should go tell people all of this because it's a fascinating story.
Yeah.
And I was like, okay, maybe that's the God wink, you know?
Yeah.
So I started and I put it all together. And somebody that was really helpful to me was Nick Barnes at UTA, and Nick and I never been in the same room that we know of. We talked on the phone some, and Troy Thomason, who was my old boss at Sony for years. Troy goes, you just need to talk to Nick. He's kind of got a different way of doing these things, and he works with Leanne Morgan, who's a great comic. I just love her to death. And I talked to Nick for a while, and he was the one. He goes, write a script.
Yeah.
And he said, whether you end up with us or whomever, write a script, do it, record it, watch yourself, listen to yourself, because it'll change drastically from year 1 to 2 what you're doing, and get a feel for how people react and don't react to stuff. So to answer your question a long way around with a very verbose answer, I had to write a script, and it was horrifying. It's like I have a dirty secret. I was on forensics team in high school. So my last 2 years, I went for first 2 years to Satsuma High School, out in the country, couple red lights in the whole town. We were the blue collar redneck kids, And then my last 2 years, I went to a college prep school in Mobile, St. Paul's, and I learned. My speech teacher goes, "You are speaking a foreign language. You are so country." And I was like, I am, because I was like, I've never really paid that much attention. And so she put me in original oratory. I had 2 years of speech and fine arts, and we traveled all over and competed and everything. And I ended up winning some of the original oratory stuff. So she taught me how to block a speech and how to speak in front of an audience. And I thoroughly enjoy it. It doesn't matter if it's 3,000 or sometimes you'll go out with artists, and they'll go, hey, why don't you come out and do a couple songs? And I'm just like, well, there's 20,000 people out there. Well, you can't see past the first 2 rows anyway.
That's right.
And you can't. You just go do it, and it's fun. And so I had a little bit of that of knowing how to craft a speech, but doing a presentation, presenting or doing a show for 90 minutes is a different animal, because you have some things in there you're like, I love this part. I don't want to let go of that. And then you do it, and people just go, they're just blank face,
Yeah.
And then something you think that's kind of funny that needs to be in there to transition, they just bust out laughing over, and you're like, okay. So you begin to kind of shape this thing, and it's no different than songwriting. It's just not a book like we talked about earlier. It's a 90-minute song.
Yeah.
And so
it's a show.
It's a show, and we do a lot of callback stuff, like what we do as writers. We set these little things up, and we come back and catch them on these payoffs.
Yeah.
Whether it's a chorus or verse. Same is a great example. When we wrote that, we're moving that hook and making it mean different things, and it's very conversational and it's very easy. And I think when we do these presentations, I set up those little breaker points along, and then we come back and pay them off in the end with a different scenario. And looking back, it means something. And we had to do sizzle reels, for websites.
Oh yeah,
we have a website. All this is so new to me. It's like, man, I was never a social media guy, and they're like, you have to do social media, and I'm like, I'm very uncomfortable doing that. But it's like, I've been doing it, and my kids have really helped me.
Yeah, so you do it enough, you just kind of get over it. You
kind of get into it, and so now I had to go dig up all these pictures.
Yeah,
for sizzle reels, and so we're digging up pictures back from 85 and 86 and 95, and I relived all those early years that we just talked about in pictures, and then we organize them and put them down. And Trace Adkins is a very good friend of mine. I think I've had like 21 songs cut on him at this time, and he's a giant, imposing, 8 feet tall kind of figure, and really one of the most compassionate guys under that tough exterior. He checked on me every other day, and I'll tell you about that in a minute. But he narrated our pre-show sizzle reel before we come out.
Oh, that's cool.
And he's got that big, deep voice, and he's down there, and I wrote out this thing, and he about halfway through, he goes, "Did you write this?" And I was like, "Yeah." He goes, "This is really good." And I said, "Well, thanks." And I said, "Well, I'm a songwriter." He goes, "Yeah, but you're not like a speech writer or anything, But Trace would call me like every couple of days, and he was like, he said, "Hey, boy," that's the way the conversation starts.
Yeah.
And he would let me come out to his farm and fish. He goes like, "I know you love to fish, And he said, "I know you can't go into town because you can't be around a lot of people. They don't want me to get sick or
yeah.
And I said, "Okay, So I'd go out, and he goes, "I won't get too close to you. I'll sit in the shade." I was like, "You think we're just fishing, but we're not really." He goes, "Don't even start." So finally, after a while, he would call me, and I think he was out on the road with Blake at the time, like he is now. And I said, you don't have to call me every other day. I said, I know you're busy.
Yeah.
And I know you got a lot on your plate. And he said, "Well, hell, Monty, it don't take no time to love somebody."
Mm.
And I thought that was one of the greatest things anybody had ever said to me.
Yeah.
And it's in the show, and people gasp when I say it because it's true.
Yeah.
And I've had people come up to me and say, man, you know, my daughter's not real touchy-feely, lovey. And I said, but we were at the show, and I said, yeah. And they said, I took her home, and she got out of the car, and she turned around and told me she loved me.
Yeah.
And it's because there was some weight to what you said, you know. But Trace, I just thought that was one of the greatest things. And we still, you know, he texts me all the time. Hey, Mitch, checking on you.
Yeah.
All that kind of stuff.
I love that.
So that was
amazing.
That was a gift. You know, some of that stuff sometimes when you get those things like that in life, it just looks like an ugly package.
Yeah.
Covered in dirt, mud, and mold growing off of you. It's like, I do not want to open this box.
Yeah.
And there's a diamond in the box, you know.
There's always another side.
There's always another side.
That's right. Well, before we get out of here, I always like to ask if you could go back in time and give younger you one piece of advice for the journey
outside of go to law school.
Yeah, yeah. What would you say?
Man, that's a great question. Nobody's ever asked me that. Probably two things. One, I'm a very patient person, but probably to just kind of maybe not patient. Maybe the word is relax. Just relax a little bit. Yeah. I think, you know, I'm real type A OCD at times, and I think that kind of keys you up a little bit, you know. And I think if you relax a little bit, life can be a little easier. I think creativity comes. I see you don't force things as much, you know. Yeah. I think it's easy to just kind of to want things to happen faster. I think that's human nature. So maybe just to relax a little bit, enjoy the ride just a little bit more, and then to it's like everybody tells me that I've done a really good job of this. The friends that I have, but I think there's always room to do a better job, and I think that is to love those friends even more than if you think you're doing good, go the extra mile even more. Yeah. That's been real, like one of those things, and it came out of the whole Trace Adkins thing I just told you, is that I think it's easy when bad things happen to people to go, oh man, I'll be praying for you. I'll be thinking about you. Yeah. And I wonder what's for dinner. You know, we move on real quick. You know, it's like we don't have like great levity and gravity unless it's happening to us. Yeah. And I think it's just to be more mindful that catastrophes are everywhere, and that everybody you meet is fighting a battle, and some people are in a war. Yeah. And I think if you go the extra mile and show them, like almost bug them a little bit. Yeah. Hey man, I'm just checking in on you. Because I just know for me, that's always made a difference. Not just a year and a half ago, but when song pluggers did it, or artists, you know, and they were engaged. Hey, send me another song or whatever. Somebody just going outside the box and being a little extra engaged in your life, that it meant something. You know, it's the difference between just having an acquaintance and being invested in them. So just to invest even at a higher level, because when we're all gone, the fact that we've been able to love somebody is probably the greatest legacy that we're going to leave, even outside of these songs that we're writing. Yeah, it's beautiful. So, wow. Well, thank you so much. Well, thank you for having me. I appreciate it. That's it. That's the pod. See you later. Hey guys, thank you so much for listening. If you want to submit a question for one of our Q&A episodes, you can do so at tenuretowne.com. We would love it if you would join the Tenuretown community, which just means we'll send you updates via email about stuff we got going on. And of course, please rate and review on Spotify, Apple Podcasts, or YouTube. Wherever you listen or watch this thing, we appreciate you so much. See you next week.